Ladies and gentlemen, welcome, and it's great to be your host on today's episode of the FINsiders podcast, where we speak to some of the most influential business leaders from across the African continent. My name is Ronak Gopaldas. I'm a director at Signal Risk, where I look at some of the biggest political, economic, and business themes and trends across the African continent. Today, I'm going to be in conversation with a very important figure who sits at the heart of the continent's payment revolution. And so it's my great pleasure today to introduce my guest, Mike Ogbalu, the CEO of the Pan-African Payment and Settlement System. Mike is a very accomplished business executive who's done some interesting stuff across the continent, and I'm really looking forward to this discussion as we explore the topics of trade, payments, and integration across Africa. Mike, welcome to the podcast. It's great to have you.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. Really delighted to be with you.
So I want to start, Mike, by understanding a little bit more about your story, how you got to where you did. So maybe if you can just kind of give us some background, taking us through some of your personal and professional highlights.
So my name is Mike Ogbalu III. I like to put the third because I'm the third generation of Mike Ogbalus. And my role is CEO of the Pan-African Payments and Settlement System, which is an infrastructure supported by Afrexim Bank, the AFCFTA Secretariat, and the AU to support the growth of trade on the African continent. I'm an engineer by training. Over the past 25 years, I have built experiences across technology, banking, and payment. And during that period, I was a group head of remittances at UBA, and then I was CEO of a mobile money company in Nigeria, the First Money, and then CEO of Verve International, which is a card scheme out of Nigeria, issued in 13 countries and accepted in over 25. My passion is around building people and also impacting the continent. So the only thing that keeps me awake at night is how can we accelerate the growth of trade? How can we unify payments across the continent and therefore improve on the prosperity of the continent?
Brilliant. Thanks, Mike. In doing my research, what's quite clear is that you are extremely passionate about continental integration. And I wanted to double click a little bit more on that and how you see trade evolving under the African Continental Free Trade Agreement and your role in PAPSS in driving this.
So when you talk about trade on the continent, or trade in general, a few things are critical. You must have participants in the trade. You must have rules around how those trades happen, and you must have an acceptable means of payment, because payment is actually the trigger for trade. So what we are looking at is how can we, looking at the continent with over 40 currencies across the continent, how can we create a situation that individual currencies across the continent are acceptable for trading with counterparties elsewhere on the continent? We've also looked at payments, and we've said to ourselves that unless we improve the efficiency of payments, trade will not be accelerated. And we're sitting in a situation where Africans trade with themselves just about between 15 and 18% and more with the rest of the world. So the only way we can make trade happen is creating an acceptable means of payment that is seamless, that can be instant, and that can support those trades to happen in their local currencies. And that's what PAPSS has done, building an ecosystem that brings together central banks, that brings together commercial banks, that brings together switches and other payment service providers, such that a trader in remote Dar es Salaam does not need to worry about how he gets payments for products that he sells across the continent. And by so doing, we create a single market across Africa.
That's brilliant, Mike. I want to kind of explore this payments area a little bit more because it's become a very, very sexy area in the past few years. Lots of money pouring into it, lots of progress. And at the end of the day, payments are around connecting people. So for this to be a sector that is kind of sustainable and successful over the longer term, what do you need to really be able to connect Africans?
When you look at the way Africans work with each other, there has been very little story of a lot of collaborations, but there's a new spirit within Africa. There's a renewed vigor in terms of the whole continent becoming more politically aware and understanding that we can only progress to the extent that we agree that it is time for us to progress. So in terms of what we need to do is to continue to align political support behind this infrastructure. And if you go back, way back in 1963, at the onset of the AU, the Organization for African Unity as it formerly was known, one of the resolutions that was passed was that the continent requires this continental payment arrangement that will be able to support its trade. That was 60 years ago. Now, there hadn't been a lot of political support and drive around this, but we have taken up that gauntlet. We're actually going around the continent. We continue to enjoy support from a number of key political figures, but that needs to increase. We need to get more of these central banks participating in PAPSS and get more of the countries across Africa participating in PAPSS. The beauty of a network is when you have more participants on the network. We have proven that the pilot works and it works beautifully. Today we're having transactions flowing across West Africa, and now we're integrating a number of other countries across Africa. What we need to do is to create that urgency among not just political actors, but also central banks across Africa to come on board on the PAPSS, and that way we will be able to make seamless payments across the continent.
I want to shift into the nitty-gritty now, Mike. And, for those listeners who are kind of new to this area, who are confused by PAPSS, what it is and how it works, can you maybe just in simple terms explain to the average listener what exactly you're working on at the moment and how it functions?
What we've done is we have built a world-class payment infrastructure, an instant payment system, which is able to allow participants, commercial actors, governments, businesses, and individuals across the continent to be able to initiate payments for a beneficiary somewhere else on the continent in their local currencies. It is instant. That is to say that if I initiate a payment today in Nigeria, in Nigerian Naira, my beneficiary in Kenya is able to receive the funds in their account in no more than 120 seconds. And then net settlement happens between settlement participants at designated settlement times, but the beneficiary gets the value instantly in their account. It is built around, it's designed not to compete with existing payment systems across Africa. So it's not designed to cannibalize all the existing efforts. It is actually designed to bring all these bright ideas and beautiful efforts done across the continent together onto this holistic platform. Now, we've also done it in such a way that PAPSS is a very low cost option. So compared to some of the other competing products in the market, we actually, our fees are as low as 10% or less than 10% of competing products in the market. So we deliver it instantly. It is low cost, and we've also built it to world-class standards. We've gone ahead to certify the system against global standards, and we have also implemented tools like sanction screening, anti-money laundering, and fraud detection, such that this system can stand up on its own against any other system anywhere around the world. So to put it simply, a trader trading in Nigeria is able to sell his shoes to a buyer somewhere in, say, Kenya or Uganda or wherever, and he's able to receive the value in his account instantly. That gives him more time to turn around his inventory and less time to wait to confirm payments or, as would be the case today. So he doesn't need to worry about how those transactions are settled down into his accounts.
Whether it be the central banks, the commercial banks, the traders, and the individual consumers, is going to be a key process and key part in getting this over the line. So can you kind of take us through who your stakeholders are and how you're managing to engage with them, and perhaps how you'd be able to convince even the most skeptical of people to kind of get on board with this initiative?
So we have a number of very important stakeholders, and this is a good time to let everyone know that PAPSS was designed to work or is built on collaboration. The first set of collaborations are between Afreximbank and the AFCFTA Secretariat, and also the AU, who have been the prime drivers of the PAPSS project, and they have designated PAPSS as an operationalizing instrument for the AFCFTA. We have also been working with the Association of Central Banks, who recently we've made significant progress, and we believe that all central banks will now come on board following from their last meeting in Lusaka. We've also made significant progress talking to trade associations, because when you talk about payment infrastructure, or trade payments are not originated by central banks. There are businesses behind this. So now we are drilling down this offering, talking to trade associations, talking to large corporates, talking to governments. So very soon, government payments for their foreign missions will be driven by PAPSS, and all other different types of payments. We're also working with a number of mobile money players, such that we can also support their cross-border payments on the PAPSS system. We are also working with airlines, especially airlines who have money trapped in one country or the other, who are able to now use PAPSS to repatriate some of their funds, also working with the local central banks in each market. So PAPSS use case is already adding value, and we're hoping to sometime in the beginning of next year begin to publish numbers to say to the market, this is the tangible way that PAPSS has already started changing lives across the continent.
So quite clear that the building blocks are being put in place, and now the momentum is building, and which is something that's creating a lot of excitement and enthusiasm, and we wish you luck on that journey. I think my final question to you is, for the skeptics out there, what gives you optimism around trade integration in Africa?
I think a combination of a few things happening around the globe, and sort of like a reawakening in some of the political class on the continent, and some of the key support that we've now enjoyed from the Assembly of Heads of State in Africa, the AU Heads of State. So all these sort of like key building blocks for success for PAPSS, and they've all come together. So in terms of speaking to the skeptics, I think that again, from the initial figures that we begin to see out of PAPSS, we're actually encouraged that the infrastructure has taken off, just needs to now achieve the level of scale. So my message to skeptics is that it's time for us to believe in Africa and to believe in ourselves. There is no new infrastructure that was built and then from day one it's at peak. This is the time for us as Africans to take control of our future and our destinies and our prosperity.
On that note, I'd like to end the conversation. Mike, thank you so much for your time and insights today. I've really enjoyed the clarity with which you've spoken, and I feel much smarter after this conversation. What's given me a lot of optimism is that this is an African solution to an African problem. It's been driven organically, and it speaks to one of my core beliefs that Africa should bet on itself. So thank you again, and good luck with what you're trying to achieve. We'll be watching and supporting keenly.
Thank you very much, Ronak. Pleasure.